Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about this thing again. So this is the GTX 760 192-bit that I, diagnosed to have intermittent issues with probably one of the memory chips. However, the card runs fine most of the time, so I decided to actually do some things with this, because this card is kind of pretty neat in the way that this is actually the lowest end version of the GK104 GPU that you can get. So on this card, and also the 660 OEM. So on TechPower, this is called the 760 OEM, and then there's also a 660 OEM, which is the exact same card, just with a different name. So, first thing you see is that, there's a sticker on the fan now. That's because that's a different fan. The fan the card came with was kinda dusty and disgusting, so I swapped it out for, this fan's from a GTX 580 reference card, so that's why it has the sticker on it. Then the other thing I've done, you can kind of already see here. So, except for this capacitor, these capacitors are the stock capacitors that came with the card that used to be on the front. They no longer are. And if you watch the other video, you will see that there's a few other things that are now on the card. This used to be empty, this used to be empty, all of these capacitor spots used to be empty, this used to be empty, this used to be empty, this used to be empty. This one I think existed, but like these two used to be empty, all of these used to not exist, these two didn't exist before, these didn't exist before. Under these you see these two. They also didn't used to not exist. So basically what I've done is I've loaded the card with capacitors, and I've even put some off the front, which is why these are now on the back of the card. So I'm just gonna remove the shroud, not gonna bother with taking the entire heatsink apart, that's a bit too annoying here. I also have an issue with touching the PCB of this, like physically touching it. I'll get into that later. Basically I've contaminated the card by being dumb, and if I touch the PCB now, yeah, you're not gonna have a good time. We'll talk about that later. So let's just take the shroud off the card. Should just pop off. Did I miss something? Oh, right, I need to remove these two. Yeah, it's still kind of tedious to do. At least I get to, like, I get to keep the fan portion here to hold on to, and I don't have to remove the main heatsink. No, actually, those stay in, this one goes. No, actually, I think, yeah, that already comes off. So, oh. Did I actually forget to put the VRM heatsink on? I just ran this card. I just ran benchmarks on the, okay, the VRM is a lot stronger than I thought. I accidentally ran the VRM naked. Well, it didn't blow up. Anyway, so what I've done is this. So there's 4 more capacitors for vCore and then 2 more for vMem. And you can kind of see like the silk screen here. That's where the capacitors used to be. I removed them and put them to the back to get access to these solder pads for these capacitors right here, so I can put them there. And the stock capacitors made their way to the back. Now this one you can see is different from the other ones, because that one, let's just say I didn't pay attention with my hot air station, and it exploded. Let's say that. Yeah, I had to vent my room because I don't want to be breathing in exploded capacitor fumes, and apart from that, it just stinks very hard. And I just took a random capacitor from the bin of random capacitors I had laying around. I think this is from like a GTX 680 reference card or something. But yeah, like it's still a capacitor. So yeah, So basically the card has been just completely loaded with extra capacitance. I also used to have a volt mod on this. I think it's this resistor that you solder on. I used a 200 kilo ohm potentiometer for this. The problem is this is on an NCP 5392P controller. You can kind of see it. And these on semiconductor controllers are kind of known for being very trigger happy with their overcurrent protection. So if you raise your V-core using a traditional feedback volt mod, these trip overcurrent protection rather fast. So you can't even add a full 100 millivolts to the card before this thing starts shutting down on you. You can bypass this problem by doing a vid mod instead. So I'll have to look into the datasheet how it's set up specifically, but this might be it. There's like an array of resistors around the controller somewhere, and depending on which resistor spots are occupied and which are left empty, the controller sets its default output voltage. And apparently if you apply a higher voltage that way, it will not trip the overcurrent protection, where it will if you just use a trim pot to like make it think it's at a different voltage than it actually is. At least that's what I've heard. I've never done a vid mod before. I guess this will be a first. Or there's just like something I need to short to just completely disable the overcurrent protection. That would also be nice, because well, we know the VRM can take some stress now, because I ran quite a lot of benchmarks on this. Like yeah, because I was testing the card. How much the mods did. So how much did the mods do? I think I should start by saying how much the card started with. So I just put the screws in while I talk. So when I started, the card did 1175 on the core, and plus 200, which is basically exactly 3 gigahertz of 1500 megahertz memory, depending on how you want to define it. So it's rather slow, which, I mean, it's an OEM card. It had like basically no capacitors on it, and now it has a lot of them. So yeah, you would probably expect quite a difference. So yeah. So core 1175, memory, I'm just gonna say 3000 here. Divide that by 2, that's your actual DRAM speed. And with the mods, the card now does 1188 core, which is one boost step ahead. And I also got it briefly running at 1201 and even 1215 core. However, those don't... like, they do the thing where in Firestrike you pass graphics test 1, which is the more core heavy of the graphics tests. Like the second graphic test is more on the memory. So it passes the core test at high core clocks, but then crashes in the memory test because of your high core clock. Now what that tells me is that it's just getting a bit too hot. Like that's typically like what happens when the card just kind of gets too hot. You just kind of crash in graphics test 2, because like graphics test 1 places a more load on it places more load on the card on the core than GT2. So if it's a stability problem, just like in general, it shouldn't pass GT1 and then crash in GT2. However, there are variables such as heat, which can make your core stability worse. And if your heat creeps up enough, and I mean, you just saw this heatsink on this card, it's not very substantial, even though this fan is very powerful, and at 100% this card actually stays at like 48 degrees. Yeah, if I put this on like water cooling, this should probably do like 1215. For the memory then, so this card, I was generally surprised by that. to the extent that I was like, wait, did I measure this wrong? Because the card went from 3000 to, what was it, 3725? Yeah, 3725, that's what it does now. 750 megahertz extra because of, well, adding a few multi-layer ceramics around the memory and then like putting these on the back and then putting like SMD polymers on the front. Which like all the VRM SMD polymers are 330 microfarads, the two I placed behind the core 470, which is why there's a pause cap in there, because I ran out of 470s. So, yeah. So the memory had quite an increase. Yeah, like I was like, wait, did I like? So the thing is, before the mod, I tried 250, which would be like, well, 50 megahertz above 3000, and the card like insta crashed. So I was like, okay, it's just not running. I'm staying at plus 200, which is 3000 on this card because the stock memory clock is 2800. So yeah, and now it does like a 925 offset. So there's a possibility that that plus 250 that I put in crashed because of a different reason. Or the memory on this just really likes capacitors. Or more like the card ships with just not enough capacitance on the memory. Which I wonder if maybe that was just a capacitor issue, like because of the suspected memory problems that the card has. Like, it hasn't artifacted. Like, so, ever since I modded the card, it has been 100% reliable. You know how I was talking, like, because it's an intermittent card, sometimes it doesn't work. Which is why it's technically dead. Or like it has an issue, like we did run mats on it and it did have a memory module that was producing errors, but only sometimes. I wonder if like the extra capacitors just got rid of that issue. Maybe like just some of the capacitors like got old, and because it's so borderline it actually caused the card to like artifact. I wonder if that's if they like that could explain why the overclocking was so bad. Before modding this, because like maybe the few capacitors it did have were so old and so worn out that it just like barely ran. So yeah, anyway, the card does really nice memory clocks now. Like better than like most GTX 780s actually, because 780s max at like 3500. This like does like over 3700. That's like more 780 Ti territory. And this is like a weird OEM down-costed 760, which is actually just a 660 rebranded. Though, so the specs for the 660 OEM and the 760 OEM are exactly the same. The difference might be that the 760 might be using higher spec memory chips. I don't know. Oh, you can't read it. Yeah, this is what I was going to talk about. You see how like my fingerprints stay on the card. So while I was soldering, I used a lot of flux. And I have some really, really bad cheap flux. And the big problem with that flux is not that it doesn't work for soldering, it does. But it is extremely sticky and you just can't clean it off. I've tried everything to clean this card. It still has like a layer of just, yeah, because like I went with like isopropyl and a toothbrush over this. The only thing it did was spread like the flux out in a thin layer above over the entire card. It's just like, yeah, it's sticky and disgusting, which is why I don't want to touch this PCB anymore. The card works like that, but like you don't want to touch it, and it looks like weird. Like I don't think it picks up on the well, it kind of does when you like shine the light at it. It like looks very dirty. Yeah, I was considering to buy an ultrasonic cleaner for this, but then I found out that you need to spend at least 1,000 euros on one that like doesn't kill your graphics card apparently, and I'm not doing that. And also I'm about to move places, and I'm no longer going to have a dishwasher, so Isopropyl alcohol it is, and no more using that flux, I guess. Guess I'm really just gonna have to buy some Amtech and like use it in very small quantities only. I'm gonna end up with cards that look like this. This is not the first time that this happened to a card, but this is like the first time it's a card that it's a project card for me now. It doesn't really have a purpose otherwise, like it's intermittent, and it has like a memory chip problem, which is something that I do want to eventually get around to fixing, but I currently have no desire to like attempt right now. So this would just be like on the pile of graphics cards to fix once I can do that, but why, like, because it usually, like most of the time works, I was just, oh, why not just make it a project card? Because this PCB is very moddable, like it comes in such a bare bones condition, just like you can pile so many mods on. Like the only problem is like that PWM controller and its overcurrent protection. Then again, you could just e-power the card, which I'm not gonna do. I wanna actually keep the card like in a condition where it can use the stock heatsink. I'm still obviously still gonna have it like on water, and I am planning to put this on the phase change. But like as far as the mods on the card go, I do wanna have it like fit the stock heatsink, which is not that hard to do. Like the heatsink in there is very small, as you have seen. And I also need to put the VRM heatsink back on. I forgot that. So anyway, the video is long enough now. Just like the card's very interesting, and I do actually have a second one of these coming in. Also defective, also described as no image. Maybe this is just got like... So the actual fault is that this HDMI port is just dead. That's why it is no image, but then coincidentally it also had memory issues for some reason. Which is why the card is actually dead. Because like the DVI ports work perfectly fine, you just get no image on the HDMI port. If the other card also just has a dead HDMI port, then that's completely fine. I'm gonna run SLI on these. So, yeah. Anyway, it's a very interesting card. If you can find one of these, like they're usually very, very cheap. Yeah, GK104, like just generally Kepler is one of the most fun things to overclock. And this is basically the cheapest way to get a GK104, which is like, so the GK110 and GK104 are like the two silicon pieces of silicon that I really like. The GK104 I kind of like more because it doesn't like, it's a very low power core, but still used in like high-end cards. But also this, but like it's the same silicon. If you want to get a GK104 for cheap, just get one of these. Like get a 760 or 660 OEM. They have their own HW board ranking, so you're not going up against like a 760 Hawk or something. So yeah, I like these as project cards. They're cheap, easily moddable, and like they have cores that are like very nice to see. And now I'm just rambling on too much, so yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing with the card. I'm going to add more mods to this. There will be more capacitors, there will be some sort of volt mod, and of course like different cooling solutions. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my incoherent, it's probably 3 AM by now, ramblings. So yeah, until next time, goodbye.